They threw her out like she was nothing. But the $5 house she bought in desperation turned her into something they could never become, unstoppable. Rejection rarely feels like an opportunity in the moment. It feels like a door slammed shut, a final judgment passed without appeal. It shakes your sense of identity and leaves you questioning everything you thought was stable, your relationships, your worth, your place in the world. When someone you trust decides you are no longer needed, the pain cuts deeper than any external hardship. It creates a silence that echoes louder than words, forcing you to confront a difficult truth. Sometimes, the people you expect to stand by you are the ones who walk away first. In that moment, it's easy to believe that rejection defines you, that it proves something is lacking within you, that maybe you really are a burden or not enough or too much. These thoughts don't come from logic. They come from the emotional shock of being pushed aside. And if you stay in that space long enough, rejection can quietly reshape your self-image into something smaller, weaker, and dependent on the approval of others. But there is another side to rejection, one that is not visible at first. It doesn't announce itself loudly. It begins as a subtle shift, a question that slowly forms in your mind. What if this isn't the end? What if this is a turning point? That question is uncomfortable because it requires you to step out of the role of the victim and into the role of the builder. It asks you to stop waiting for validation and start creating it for yourself. The transformation doesn't happen instantly. It starts with small decisions, choosing not to give up when it would be easier to do so, choosing to take one step forward even when you're unsure of the direction. These choices feel insignificant at first, but they carry a powerful message. You are still in control of your story. Rejection may have changed your circumstances, but it hasn't taken away your ability to act. As you begin to move forward, something unexpected happens. The same rejection that once felt like a loss starts to create space. Space where expectations used to exist. Space where obligations once dictated your choices. Space where you can finally ask yourself what you want, not what others expect from you. This space can feel uncomfortable, even empty at times, but it is also where growth begins. Growth is rarely comfortable. It requires you to face parts of yourself that you may have ignored. Your fears, your insecurities, your dependence on external approval, all of it comes to the surface. Rejection forces you to confront these things because you no longer have the distractions that once kept them hidden. And while that process can be painful, it is also incredibly freeing. Because once you see these patterns clearly, you have the power to change them. One of the most important shifts that happens during this process is the realization that your value is not tied to anyone else's perception of you. This is not an easy lesson to learn, especially if you've spent years seeking validation from others. But rejection makes it unavoidable. When the people you rely on no longer affirm your worth, you are left with a choice: believe their judgment or redefine your own. Redefining your worth is not about arrogance or denial. It's about honesty. It's about recognizing your abilities, your resilience, your capacity to adapt and grow. It's about understanding that your life has meaning beyond the roles others assign to you. And most importantly, it's about taking responsibility for how you see yourself, instead of handing that responsibility over to someone else. As you begin to rebuild, you may find that the path forward looks nothing like the life you once had. That can be unsettling at first. There is comfort in familiarity, even when it's flawed. But there is also opportunity in change. The absence of your old life creates room for something new, something that reflects who you are now, not who you were expected to be. Along the way, you will likely encounter people who see you differently. People who recognize your effort, your determination, your growth. These connections are often deeper and more genuine than the ones you lost, because they are built on mutual respect rather than obligation. They remind you that rejection is not universal, it is specific. Just because one person or group fails to see your value doesn't mean others won't. This realization can be incredibly empowering. It shifts your perspective from scarcity to possibility. Instead of focusing on what you've lost, you begin to see what you can gain. New skills, new relationships, new experiences. All of it becomes accessible once you stop defining yourself by rejection. Over time, the pain of rejection doesn't disappear completely, but it changes. It becomes less of a wound and more of a reference point, a reminder of where you started and how far you've come. It loses its power to control your emotions and instead becomes a source of strength. Because every challenge you overcome reinforces a simple truth: you are capable of more than you thought. What once felt like an ending begins to look like a beginning, not because the rejection itself was good, but because of what it forced you to become. It pushed you out of a place of comfort and into a space where growth was necessary. It removed the safety net that allowed you to stay the same, and in doing so, it gave you the chance to evolve. There is a quiet confidence that comes from this transformation. It's not loud or boastful. It doesn't seek validation. It simply exists, grounded in experience. You know what it feels like to lose everything you depended on, and you know what it takes to rebuild from nothing. That knowledge changes you in a way that no external approval ever could. Eventually, you may even reach a point where you feel a sense of gratitude, not for the rejection itself, but for the growth that followed. You understand that without that moment, you might have stayed in a place that limited your potential. You might never have discovered your strength, your independence, your ability to create a life on your own terms. This doesn't mean you excuse the actions of those who rejected you. It doesn't mean their behavior was justified. It simply means you refuse to let their decision define your future. You take ownership of your story, not because you had control over what happened, but because you have control over what happens next. And that is where the true power of rejection lies. Not in the pain it causes, but in the transformation it can trigger. It strips away illusions, forces clarity, and challenges you to become more than you were before. It asks you to rise, not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. In the end, rejection is not a verdict, it's an invitation. An invitation to rebuild, to redefine, to rediscover who you are when everything familiar is taken away. Most people don't realize how much of their self-worth is quietly shaped by others. It starts early: approval from parents, praise from teachers, acceptance from friends. Over time, this external validation becomes a mirror, and we begin to see ourselves only through it. If people appreciate us, we feel valuable. If they criticize or reject us, we begin to question our worth. It feels natural, almost automatic, to let others decide how we see ourselves. The problem with this pattern is that it places your identity in unstable hands. People's opinions change. Their priorities shift. Their understanding of you is often incomplete, filtered through their own experiences, biases, and limitations. When your value depends on something so unpredictable, it creates a fragile sense of self, one that can be shaken by a single harsh word or a moment of rejection. At first, this dependency doesn't seem harmful. In fact, it can feel motivating. You try harder to please, to fit in, to meet expectations. You adjust your behavior, your choices, even your dreams to align with what others approve of. But slowly, something important begins to fade: your authentic self. The more you chase validation, the more you drift away from who you truly are. The turning point often comes when that validation is suddenly taken away, when the same people whose approval you relied on no longer offer it. It can happen through rejection, criticism, or simply being overlooked. Whatever the form, the impact is the same. You are left without the external reinforcement that once defined your worth. In that moment, it feels like everything collapses. Without someone telling you that you matter, it becomes difficult to believe it yourself. Doubt creeps in, and it's relentless. Questions surface that you may have never asked before. Am I really good enough? Do I have value on my own? Was I ever truly appreciated, or was it all conditional? These questions are uncomfortable, but they are also necessary, because hidden within them is an opportunity, a chance to rebuild your sense of self on a stronger, more stable foundation. Instead of relying on others to define your value, you begin the process of defining it for yourself. This shift is not easy. It requires you to challenge beliefs that may have been ingrained for years. You have to separate your identity from the opinions of others, which can feel like stepping into unfamiliar territory without a guide. There is no immediate reassurance, no applause, no external confirmation that you are on the right path. It's just you, your thoughts, and your willingness to keep going despite the uncertainty. The first step in this process is awareness, recognizing how much influence others have had over your self-perception, not in a judgmental way but in an honest one. Understanding that your need for validation is not a flaw, it's a learned behavior, and like any learned behavior, it can be unlearned. As you become more aware, you start to notice patterns. Moments when you seek approval before making a decision. Times when you hesitate to express your true opinion because you fear disapproval. Situations where you measure your success based on how others react rather than how you feel about it. These patterns are subtle, but they reveal how deeply external validation is woven into your thinking. Breaking these patterns requires intentional effort. It means making choices that align with your values, even if they don't earn immediate approval. It means speaking honestly, even when it feels uncomfortable. It means pursuing goals that matter to you, not just those that impress others. Each of these actions may feel small, but together they begin to reshape your relationship with yourself. One of the most powerful realizations during this journey is that your value is not something you have to earn. It's something you already possess. It's not dependent on achievements, recognition, or approval. It exists simply because you exist. This idea can feel abstract at first, especially if you're used to measuring your worth through external standards. But over time, as you practice self-acceptance, it becomes more tangible. Self-acceptance doesn't mean ignoring your flaws or pretending to be perfect. It means acknowledging all parts of yourself, your strengths, your weaknesses, your successes, your failures, and understanding that they all contribute to who you are. It means treating yourself with the same compassion and respect that you would offer to someone you care about. As you build this internal sense of worth, something shifts. The opinions of others begin to lose their power over you. They don't disappear entirely. You still listen, you still consider feedback, but they no longer define you. You become less reactive, less dependent on external approval. Your confidence starts to come from within, grounded in your own understanding of your value. This kind of confidence is different from the kind that comes from praise or recognition. It's quieter, more stable. It doesn't need constant reinforcement because it's not based on something that can be taken away. It allows you to move through the world with a sense of security, knowing that your worth is not up for debate. With this newfound perspective, your decisions begin to change. You choose paths that align with your authentic self, even if they are unconventional. You set boundaries that protect your well-being, even if they disappoint others. You invest your time and energy in relationships that are based on mutual respect, rather than trying to earn acceptance where it is not freely given. This doesn't mean you become indifferent to others. Connection still matters. Relationships still matter, but they are no longer the source of your value, they are an extension of it. You engage with others from a place of wholeness, not from a need to be validated. And that changes the quality of your interactions in a profound way. People who value you for who you are will recognize this shift. They will respect your boundaries, appreciate your authenticity, and support your growth. Those who were only interested in what you could provide or how you could fit their expectations may drift away. And while that can be difficult, it also creates space for more meaningful connections to enter your life. Over time, you begin to see that your worth was never something others had the authority to define. They could influence your perception, but they could not determine your value. That realization is freeing. It removes the pressure to constantly prove yourself and replaces it with the freedom to simply be yourself. There may still be moments when doubt returns. Old habits don't disappear overnight. You might find yourself seeking approval or questioning your worth in certain situations. But the difference is that now you are aware of it. You can recognize those thoughts for what they are, echoes of a past mindset, not reflections of your true value. And each time you choose to trust yourself instead of seeking validation, you reinforce a new belief. A belief that your worth is inherent, not conditional. That you don't need permission to feel valuable. That you are enough, not because someone else says so, but because you know it to be true. This journey doesn't have a final destination. It's an ongoing process of self-discovery and growth. But with each step, you move closer to a version of yourself that is grounded, authentic, and resilient. A version that doesn't crumble under criticism or inflate with praise, but remains steady regardless of external opinions. In the end, defining your own value is not about rejecting the world. It's about reclaiming yourself. It's about shifting the source of your worth from something external and unstable to something internal and enduring. It's about understanding that while others may have opinions about you, they do not have ownership over who you are. And once you truly internalize that, everything changes. You stop chasing validation and start creating a life that reflects your true self. You stop shrinking to fit expectations and start expanding into your potential. You stop asking, "Am I enough for them?" and start knowing without hesitation that you are enough for yourself. There's a quiet assumption many people carry through life, that support will come from the people closest to them. Family, longtime friends, familiar faces. It feels natural to expect that those who know you best will stand by you when things fall apart. And sometimes that expectation is met. But sometimes it is. Sometimes the people you trust the most are not the ones who show up when you need them, and that realization can feel like a second kind of loss layered on top of whatever you're already going through. When that happens, it's easy to close yourself off, to believe that if the people who were supposed to care didn't, then no one else will either. It creates a kind of emotional withdrawal, where you stop expecting help altogether because expecting it feels dangerous. But in that space, something important can be missed. The possibility that support doesn't always come from where you expect it, and that meaningful connection is not limited to history or obligation. Unexpected support often appears quietly. It doesn't arrive with grand promises or dramatic declarations. It shows up in small, practical ways. A conversation when you didn't know you needed one. A simple act of kindness without any expectation in return. These moments may seem minor at first, but they carry a different kind of weight because they are chosen, not required. What makes this kind of support powerful is that it is not based on what you've done for someone in the past or what they feel obligated to give you. It comes from a place of genuine human connection. Someone sees your situation, recognizes your effort, or simply acknowledges your presence, and decides to help. That decision, made freely and without pressure, often means more than support that comes from obligation. At first, it can be difficult to accept help from people you don't know well. There's hesitation, even suspicion. You might question their motives or feel uncomfortable receiving kindness when you don't feel you have anything to offer in return. This discomfort is natural, especially if you're used to relationships where value is measured by exchange, where giving and receiving are carefully balanced. But over time, as these interactions continue, something shifts. You begin to see that not all relationships are transactional. Some are simply human. They are built on empathy, understanding, and a shared recognition that everyone struggles.
Heart touched? Like, share, and subscribe. What would you do? Comment below.
At some point. These connections don't demand that you prove your worth before you receive support. They recognize your worth as something that already exists. This realization can be deeply healing. It challenges the belief that you have to earn care or prove your value to be supported. It shows you that people can choose to stand by you simply because they see you as another human being deserving of dignity and respect. And that kind of support often arrives when you least expect it, from people you might not have noticed before. As these relationships develop, they begin to fill a space that was once occupied by expectation and disappointment, not by replacing what was lost, but by offering something different, something more grounded and authentic. There is no history tying you together, no obligation forcing the connection. What exists is mutual respect and a shared willingness to show up for each other. These connections often grow stronger because they are built during difficult times. When someone supports you when you have little to give in return, the bond that forms is rooted in sincerity. It's not influenced by convenience or expectation. It's shaped by real experiences, by moments where both people choose to be present despite the challenges. One of the most important things this teaches is that family is not a fixed concept. It's not limited to those you are related to by blood. It can expand, evolve, and include people who enter your life at unexpected moments. People who choose you just as you choose them. And in many cases, these chosen connections can feel more supportive and genuine than the ones you assumed would always be there. This doesn't mean that all existing relationships lose their value. It simply means that support is not guaranteed by proximity or history. It is defined by action, by who shows up, who listens, who helps when it matters. And sometimes, the people who do those things are not the ones you expected. Learning to recognize and appreciate this kind of support requires openness. It means allowing yourself to trust again, even after disappointment. It means being willing to accept help without feeling like it diminishes your independence. In reality, accepting support is not a sign of weakness. It's a recognition that connection is a fundamental part of being human. As you become more open to these unexpected relationships, you may also find yourself offering support in return, not out of obligation, but out of genuine care. The same way someone chose to help you, you choose to be there for others. This creates a cycle of support that is not based on expectation, but on mutual understanding and respect. Over time, these connections can become a new kind of foundation, not one built on assumptions, but on shared experiences and consistent actions. You begin to trust not because you have to, but because you have seen how these people respond when it matters. And that trust feels different, stronger, more reliable because it has been tested. There is also a sense of gratitude that comes with this realization, not just for the help itself, but for the reminder that kindness exists beyond the boundaries you once believed in. It shows you that even in moments of isolation, you are not entirely alone. There are people who will step forward, who will offer what they can, even if they have no prior connection to you. This understanding changes how you see the world. Instead of viewing relationships as fixed roles, family, friend, acquaintance, you begin to see them as dynamic connections shaped by choice and action. You realize that meaningful support is not limited by labels. It can come from anywhere at any time if you are open to it. At the same time, it encourages you to reevaluate the relationships you already have, to look beyond titles and consider the substance of those connections, who truly listens when you speak, who stands by you when things are difficult, who values you for who you are, not just for what you can provide. These questions help you distinguish between relationships that are based on obligation and those that are based on genuine care. As you make these distinctions, you may choose to invest more energy in the connections that feel authentic and supportive. This doesn't always mean cutting people out of your life, but it does mean setting boundaries and adjusting your expectations. It means recognizing that not everyone will be able to offer the support you need, and that's okay. What matters is that you don't limit yourself to those expectations, that you remain open to the possibility that support can come from unexpected places, that you allow yourself to receive it when it does, and to give it when you can. In the end, the most meaningful support often comes from those who choose to be there, not those who are expected to be there. It comes from people who see your struggle and decide to stand beside you, not because they have to, but because they want to. And in that choice, there is a kind of connection that goes beyond obligation, one that is rooted in respect, empathy, and the simple act of showing up when it matters most. Hardship has a way of stripping life down to its rawest form. It removes comfort, certainty, and the familiar structures people rely on. What remains is often uncomfortable, even frightening, a version of reality where excuses don't work and avoidance is no longer possible. In that space, people are forced to confront themselves in a way they may have never done before. Not the version shaped by routine or expectation, but the core of who they are when everything else falls away. At first, hardship feels overwhelming. It doesn't ask for permission before entering your life, and it rarely arrives at a convenient time. It disrupts plans, challenges your sense of control, and tests your limits. The immediate reaction is often resistance, wanting things to go back to how they were, hoping the situation will resolve itself without requiring too much change. But hardship doesn't respond to denial. It demands engagement. When you can no longer avoid it, something shifts. You begin to realize that survival itself requires action. Small steps at first, solving one problem then another. These steps may feel insignificant compared to the scale of the challenge, but they serve a critical purpose. They prove that you are not completely powerless. Even in difficult circumstances, you still have the ability to respond, to adapt, to keep moving forward. As this process continues, you start to uncover strengths you didn't know you had, not because they suddenly appeared, but because they were never required before. Comfort often hides potential. When life is stable, there is little need to push beyond your limits. But when that stability disappears, those hidden capabilities begin to surface. You learn to think differently, to act more decisively, to endure longer than you thought possible. This discovery is rarely dramatic. It doesn't feel like a sudden transformation or a moment of clarity. It's gradual, built through repetition. Each time you face a challenge and find a way through it, your confidence grows. Not in an exaggerated sense, but in a quiet, grounded way. You begin to trust your ability to handle difficulties because you have evidence. You've done it before. Hardship also forces you to become resourceful. When options are limited, creativity becomes essential. You start to see possibilities where you once saw obstacles. You use what you have, even if it's not ideal. You make adjustments, find alternatives, and keep going despite imperfections. This kind of thinking is not taught in comfort. It is developed through necessity. Alongside resourcefulness comes resilience. Not the kind that ignores pain or pretends everything is fine, but the kind that acknowledges difficulty and continues anyway. Resilience is built in moments where giving up feels easier, yet you choose not to. It's in the decision to keep trying after failure, to stand up after being knocked down, to face uncertainty without a guarantee of success. These moments are not easy. They often come with doubt, frustration, and exhaustion. There are times when progress feels slow or non-existent, when the effort you put in doesn't seem to produce immediate results. This is where hardship tests more than just your physical or practical abilities. It tests your mindset, your willingness to persist even when the outcome is unclear. Over time, you begin to understand that strength is not about avoiding difficulty, but about navigating it. It's not about always having the right answers, but about being willing to keep searching for them. This perspective changes how you approach challenges. Instead of seeing them as barriers, you begin to see them as opportunities to grow, even if that growth comes with discomfort. One of the most profound changes that hardship brings is a shift in perspective. Things that once seemed important may lose their significance, while things that were overlooked become more meaningful. You gain a clearer sense of what truly matters, your values, your priorities, your sense of purpose. This clarity can guide your decisions in a way that comfort never could. At the same time, hardship can deepen your understanding of yourself. You become more aware of your limits, but also of your capacity to push beyond them. You learn how you respond under pressure, what motivates you, what holds you back. This self-awareness is a powerful tool because it allows you to make more intentional choices moving forward. There is also a sense of independence that develops through hardship, not in the sense of isolation, but in the confidence that you can rely on yourself when necessary. You begin to trust your judgment, your instincts, your ability to adapt. This doesn't mean you stop.
Heart touched? Like, share, and subscribe. What would you do? Comment below.
valuing support from others, but it means you are not entirely dependent on it. As you move through difficult experiences, you may also develop a greater sense of empathy. Having faced your own struggles, you become more aware of the challenges others may be facing. You recognize that strength is not always visible, and that people are often dealing with more than they show. This understanding can change how you interact with others, making you more patient, more compassionate, more willing to offer support. Hardship doesn't just shape your abilities, it shapes your character. It influences how you see the world, how you treat others, how you approach your own life. It can make you more resilient, more grounded, more aware of what truly matters. These changes are not always immediate, but they become evident over time as you reflect on your experiences. There may still be moments when the weight of hardship feels too heavy, when the progress you've made seems small compared to the challenges you face. In those moments, it's important to remember that growth is not always visible in real time. The strength you are building is often internal, developing quietly even when external results are not immediately apparent. Eventually, you may reach a point where you can look back and see how far you've come, where the person you are now feels different from the person you were before the hardship began. Not necessarily better in every way, but stronger, more capable, more aware. You begin to see that the experience, as difficult as it was, contributed to your growth in ways that comfort never could. This doesn't mean you would choose hardship if given the option. It doesn't mean the experience was easy or without pain, but it does mean that something meaningful came from it, that within the difficulty, there was an opportunity to discover parts of yourself that might have remained hidden otherwise. Strength in this context is not a fixed trait. It is something that develops through experience, through challenge, through persistence. It is built in moments where you are tested and choose to continue. It is reinforced each time you face something difficult and find a way through it. And while hardship may not be something anyone actively seeks, it often becomes a defining part of the journey, not because of the struggle itself, but because of what it reveals. The resilience you didn't know you had, the resourcefulness you developed under pressure, the confidence that comes from overcoming challenges you once thought impossible. In the end, hardship doesn't just show you who you are, it shows you who you can become at first glance. Some things seem too broken to matter, too damaged to fix, too insignificant to deserve attention. People pass by them every day, places, opportunities, even individuals, without a second thought. The judgment is quick, almost automatic. If something doesn't immediately show value, it is labeled as useless and left behind. It's easier that way. It saves time, energy, and effort. But what most people don't realize is that value is not always visible on the surface. Sometimes what appears worthless is simply waiting for the right perspective, the right pair of eyes, the right amount of patience. It's not that the value isn't there, it's that it hasn't been discovered yet. And discovering it requires something many people are unwilling to give: time, effort, and belief without proof. When Martha first stood in front of that broken house, nothing about it suggested promise. The roof sagged, the walls were decaying, the floors were barely holding together. To everyone else it was obvious, a lost cause, something to avoid, not invest in. The laughter at the auction wasn't just about the property. It was about the idea that anything good could come from it. But Martha saw something different, not because the house looked better to her, but because she had reached a point where she had nothing left to lose. And in that space, something powerful happens. You stop looking for perfection and you start looking for possibility. Even if that possibility is small, uncertain, or hidden beneath layers of damage. That shift in perspective changes everything. Instead of asking, "Is this valuable?" you begin to ask, "What could this become?" That question opens the door to effort, and effort is what reveals value. The process of uncovering hidden worth is rarely quick. It's slow, often frustrating, and filled with moments of doubt. When Martha began working on the house, there were no immediate signs of transformation. The first days didn't make the place beautiful, they made her exhausted. Her hands ached, her body protested, and progress felt almost invisible. But she continued, not because she was certain of the outcome, but because she was willing to try. This is where most people give up. When results are not immediate, it's easy to assume there are none. But value doesn't always reveal itself quickly. Sometimes it is buried under layers of neglect, waiting for consistent effort to bring it to the surface. And that effort requires patience, the kind that keeps going even when there is no guarantee of reward. As the days turned into weeks, small changes began to appear: a cleared floor, a sealed window, a roof that no longer leaked as much. None of these things made the house valuable in the eyes of others, but they were signs of progress. And progress, no matter how small, is evidence that transformation is possible. The same principle applies beyond physical spaces. People themselves are often judged too quickly, labeled based on circumstances, age, or past failures, declared as not useful, too late, or not enough. But just like that house, those judgments are often based on what is visible, not what is possible. Martha had been seen as a burden, someone past her prime, someone whose best years were behind her. But those labels were not truths, they were assumptions. And assumptions, like appearances, can be misleading. What changed her story was not luck, but persistence. The willingness to keep working, to keep believing, even when nothing around her confirmed that belief. And in that persistence, something extraordinary happened, not just to the house, but to her. The discovery of the hidden journals was unexpected, but it wasn't entirely accidental. It came as a result of her effort, her attention to detail, her refusal to abandon the process. If she had walked away earlier, if she had accepted the initial judgment of the house as worthless, that discovery would have remained hidden. This is one of the most important lessons in recognizing value. Sometimes, the reward is not visible at the beginning. It reveals itself only after you commit to the process, only after you've invested time, energy, and belief into something others have dismissed. When the truth about the house finally came to light, everything changed. The same structure that had been mocked became a place of historical importance. The same walls that seemed ready to collapse became the foundation of something meaningful. But the house itself had not changed overnight. It was the understanding of its value that changed. This shift in perception is powerful. It shows how easily value can be overlooked when judged too quickly. It reminds us that what we dismiss today could hold significance tomorrow, if only we are willing to look deeper. For Martha, the transformation was not just external. Yes, the house became something remarkable, but so did she. The process of rebuilding the house rebuilt her as well. It gave her purpose, strength, and a renewed sense of identity. She was no longer defined by what others had taken from her, but by what she had created with her own hands. This connection between effort and value is important. When you invest yourself into something, your time, your energy, your determination, you begin to see its worth in a different way. It is no longer just an object or an opportunity. It becomes a reflection of your journey. And that makes it priceless in a way that cannot be measured by money or external validation. As time passed, the cottage stood as a symbol of that transformation, not just for visitors or researchers, but for Martha herself. Every repaired wall, every restored beam, every detail carried a story, a reminder of where she started and how far she had come. People who visited saw a historical site. They saw preserved journals, restored architecture, and a piece of the past brought back to life. But what they didn't always see was the deeper story, the nights of doubt, the days of exhaustion, the quiet determination that made it all possible. Martha knew that story. She carried it with her in every step, every breath, every moment she spent in that place. And it gave her something she had once lost: dignity. In the end, the house was never truly worthless. It simply required someone willing to see beyond its condition, someone willing to invest effort without immediate reward, someone willing to believe that value can exist even when it is not obvious. And that is the lesson that extends far beyond one house, one person, or one story. Value is not always visible at first glance. It is often hidden, waiting to be uncovered by those who are willing to look deeper, work harder, and believe longer than others. Martha's journey didn't end with the restoration of the cottage or the recognition of its historical importance. It continued in the life she built afterward, a life defined not by what she had lost, but by what she had created. A life where she chose her own worth, her own purpose, her own path. She stood one evening on her porch, looking out at the forest that had once felt isolating but now felt like home. The same place that had been silent and cold now held warmth, meaning, and belonging. And in that quiet moment, she understood something fully for the first time. Nothing and no one is truly worthless unless we stop trying to see their potential. Moral: what the world calls worthless may simply be undiscovered value. Sometimes, all it takes is belief, effort, and patience to turn what was ignored into something truly priceless. This story is intended for inspirational and educational purposes. While it reflects themes of resilience and personal growth, certain elements may be dramatized for storytelling impact. The message is to motivate and encourage viewers to believe in their own strength and potential, regardless of life circumstances.
Heart touched? Like, share, and subscribe. What would you do? Comment below.